So, welcome everybody. Obviously, Saturday Walkabout is looking a little bit different today. We're going to call it Cat Chat. All right, this is Season 3, Episode 1. So, I guess if you don't know who we are by now and you're just now finding out about what we do there, well, I guess who the heck are we?
I'm Bridget.
And I'm Andy.
I am a senior keeper at Big Cat Rescue in Tampa, Florida. I help take care of all different sizes of cats, from small to very big. I help by feeding them in the morning. I help by cleaning their enclosures during the day. And anything that is related to cat care, I take care of. Now, remember, we are a GFAS accredited sanctuary, which stands for the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. It means we do not buy, breed, touch, sell, or trade any of our cats. So when I talk about caring for cats, it's all non-contact.
Yep, no touchy. And my name's Andrew. I'm one of the senior partners there at Big Cat Rescue. My job is to, well, I guess find things to do. So yeah, I help out with all sorts of different things around the sanctuary. Everything from doing stuff like this to sharpening knives to just general tech stuff. Yeah, fixing phones. That's a fun one lately. But yeah, so today we have something pretty cool going on. So we had a very special guest for our first video, and I think it was appropriate that we had this guest. So who's everybody going to see in just a minute? Sorry there.
Well, it's just going to be the three of us. So I'm actually going to keep it a little bit of a surprise, although you probably all know it's Carole Baskin, our founder and CEO of Big Cat Rescue. We're going to chat with her. So if you guys want to get to learn more about what that conversation entailed, stay tuned. Please do. We had a very detailed conversation about the Big Cat Public Safety Act and a lot of other things. So if you haven't heard Carole talk very candidly about these items, well, stay tuned. Now's your chance.
Yeah, now's your chance. All right, guys. I hope you enjoy this.
We'll see you again soon.
I'm so happy to see the Cat Chat show coming back on.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to have you as our very first guest. So for those of you that are brand new to this, Carole started Cat Chat several years ago. It kind of fell by the wayside a little bit as things got busier, I'm assuming. And she recently asked us to start picking it back up. And we decided that we would absolutely love to do that because it sounds like a great opportunity. And so you guys are here with us for the first episode of Season 3 Cat Chat with Bridget and Andy and our guest, Miss Carole Baskin.
All right, cool. For a while, Carole, you've been crazy busy with all sorts of stuff that's going on in the world. So I guess let's start there with I guess an unwritten question. But Carole, what's new? What's going on that you'd like everybody to know about, and then we'll dig into all these questions that we wrote up.
Well, before I go there, let me tell you how happy I am that you guys are taking over the Cat Chat show, because you have done such an amazing job with Catterday.
Oh, thank you.
And you've built up such a following of people who just love you. And I know that this is going to be another way that they can follow you guys and learn more about all kinds of amazing people. I had so much fun when I was doing the Cat Chat show, interviewing all of these people that were saving domestic cats and big cats and all of these just unsung heroes.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that you will find a litany of people that are just fascinating that everybody's going to want to hear from. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. We're excited to go down this rabbit hole.
It is that. As far as things that are going on right now, we just finished filming for a new show that we have coming out that I can't tell you anything about.
All right.
But it's going to be really exciting. I just can't wait. And I think it's going to be a huge change in the way people view animal issues on TV. I think that the way this is done is in such an entertaining way that people will tune in week after week to see this show and other shows like this, where the animals are the ones being protected instead of harassed, like we've seen in so many other shows. So it's about time that we make it about the animals and saving the animals and protecting the animals and highlighting the sanctuaries that are doing good work out there. And I'm just so excited to be a part of that. I've been doing a lot of interviews. And so, if we had done this 2 years ago, I would have said it's weird to be on this side of the interview table. But in the past year and a half, because of all of the craziness that happened, I've been interviewed by people with accents that I can just barely even understand. So the nice thing about that is that people all around the world are thinking about big cats. And so that's been an exciting part of this. I've been putting out my daily diary. So right before Tiger King came out, I had like 2 or 3 months before that, I had started recording a page from my diary and putting it out there on YouTube every day. And so I record 4 or 5 of those at a time so that I have them scheduled in advance, because crazy stuff happens. Like right now, Duchess has a bird in her cage that as soon as I get off of here, I got to go to get the bird out. It's dead.
Oh boy.
It's not in any peril, but there's always something.
Oh, that girl.
Yeah. So those are coming out every day. And it's been interesting to read some of this stuff that I haven't read in 40 years, 50 years.
Wow.
And the details. So like yesterday was 9/11, and I'm sorry if I'm messing up your podcast because it may not come out right then, but going back and reading 20 years ago when 9/11 happened, what I was thinking and how I was feeling. And so much of that would have been lost to my memory because so much is being lost daily in my memory. And I'm really glad that I had recorded all of that. So that's been fun. It's been an awful lot of that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot.
We have the cat chat, or not the cat chat, but the big cat room on Clubhouse now every Saturday at 6 p.m. That's been fun.
I really need to do that.
Yeah, we need to check out Clubhouse. I think when we get home from Big Cat on Saturdays, and after we've done grocery shopping, we're both just kind of like,
Yeah, we usually just order a pizza, turn on some TV, talk about your day.
Yeah.
Mine's like, I sharpened knives, I gave a walkabout, and then we just tune out. So yeah, we definitely need to get in that Clubhouse. Where can people find that? Is that a Facebook thing? I'm not up on what generation Millennial Z's up to these days.
It's a phone thing. So if you have a Android, you just go to the Google Play Store and download the Clubhouse app. And if you have an iPhone, you go to the Apple Store and download the app. It's free. And it used to be that you had to be invited because it was in a trial period this past year, but it's taken off to the point where now anybody who downloads it on their phone can jump right in. You used to have to get somebody to recommend you before you could be there. And what's cool about it is you can choose from all different kinds of topics that you're interested in. So I'm interested in cryptocurrencies and NFTs and psychology, and of course, all of the animal issues. And so you pick all of these things that you're interested in, and it will alert you whenever there is a room opening. And so the way a room operates, we have the Big Cats room that's every Saturday at 6. It doesn't have to be at a scheduled time. You could pick any time. And if you guys wanted to do some rooms in our Big Cat room, I'm sure we could set you guys up to do that. And you could pick a different day that works better for you because not everybody can be there at that same time. We have people all around the world. So if you had a time that was better for y'all, it might be better for some of our listeners as well. And then typically what we do there is we talk for an hour. And so somebody will come up with an idea, like yesterday, they wanted to talk about what happens when the Big Cat Public Safety Act passes. What does that mean to sanctuaries? What does that mean to the animals? What does that mean to law enforcement? And so I give a 15-minute talk about what that is. And then everybody who is on the call can ask, they raise their hand. It's a little push button and it raises your hand, and we pull you up onto the stage. And then that person can actually speak to the entire group and ask their question, and I can answer it. So last night it was like 42 people, I think. And when Brittany was on, it was like 80 to 100 people came in to listen to Brittany. And so she was able to do Q&A, answering their questions in real time to them. So that's been fun. And we started recording those so that we can put them on Daily Big Cat, because so many people are like,
cool.
I wanted to see it. Yeah, it's like the kind of things that you're currently doing, except you're having to answer people in text, whereas this is real time, being able to answer them verbally. And so much can be lost in tone when you're typing, especially with thumbs. So it's a great way to really be nice to each other and in a way that is, and if somebody's horrible, you can kick them off the stage.
Oh, that's good.
I will be the master of the asterisks on that. Darn spell check.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That might not be a handy thing.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll figure it out. Yeah. But do we have some questions here for Carole?
Yeah, let's dive into that. Let's see. The first one on here, if you want to go for it, since you typed these up.
All right. I'll do some. You can do some.
Yeah, sure. You want the glasses?
No. Okay, thanks. I can read without the glasses. What people don't know is that there are no lenses in those glasses. So,
Well, I do this every day for work, so no glare. Still look nerdy. All right, so go for it. Yeah.
So, Carole, most people already know your story and how you got into rescuing exotic cats, but just in case they aren't familiar, can you give us a quick summary of your journey into the world of big cats and how you landed here?
That's one of the things that's been really weird in the last year and a half, is because you just said most people know your story. And what I'm finding is most people had no idea about anything. I thought it was famous. I thought everybody knew about Big Cat Rescue and how we got started. And then people are like, what's it like to be famous? And it was like, I thought we were famous, but yes, we weren't. So the way the sanctuary started was I left home at the age of 15. And by the time I was 17, I was, my goal in life was to save domestic cats and kittens from being killed in shelters due to overpopulation. And I spent a lot of time at veterinary offices. And what happens is if a bobcat gets hit by a car, some good Samaritan brings the cat in, the vet fixes them up in 30 minutes to an hour, and then there's no place for that cat to go for rehab. And so they were like, you like cats, take this cat home with you. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, you guys have been around bobcats and you know what that means. I mean, it's like, they spend every moment of their life wanting to kill you. Wild bobcats do.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that when I was 17, just rehabbing them and releasing them. And then when I was in my 30s, we had built up the real estate business and we were looking for a way to give back. And I was trying to figure out how, I could help cats. And we were buying big tracts of land, like Easy Street was 40 acres back there. It was a piece of property we'd loan money on. And then we'd buy llamas and turn them loose. And the llamas would clear about eye level. And then we could move them to another piece of property. So we were at an exotic animal auction and buying llamas. And this guy came in with a 6-month-old bobcat on a leash, and she was wrapped around his neck. And he said that his wife didn't want her anymore as a pet because she was becoming a bobcat, which is what they do at about 6 months old. Yep. And so the guy next to me started bidding on her. And, I foolishly thought he was just wanted a pet. And I leaned over and I said, when that cat grows up, she's going to tear your face off. And he said, I'm a taxidermist. I'm just going to club her in the head in the parking lot and make a den decoration out of her. And I started crying and Dawn started bidding. We probably paid more for that bobcat than anybody has ever paid for a bobcat in the history of bobcats. But she came home with us because she was not going to die in the parking lot. But she had been declawed. She had been raised by people. She had been born in another state. And all of those things made it illegal and immoral for us to try and release her because she wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes out there.
Yeah.
So she was as wretched a pet as you would expect, and would lay on top of the refrigerator and wait for my husband to open the refrigerator door. And then she'd leap down on his head and start ripping his hair out. She'd get in the bed between us and just dare him to get anywhere near me. And she was terrorizing Jamie. She was terrorizing who was 12 at the time. And our German Shepherd was cowering in the corner from this little bobcat. And so instead of thinking, wow, that's a really bad pet, my husband decided he wanted to find a mate for her. So back then there was a publication which went out of business a couple of years ago, thankfully, called the Animal Finder's Guide. And he looked through there, found a guy that said he would sell him a bobcat for her to grow up with. And when we got there in La Center, Minnesota in 1993, it was a fur farm. And I didn't know people killed cats for their fur. And as I looked around inside this place, it was like this big metal shed. And if you've ever seen rows and rows of rabbit hutches, my grandmother raised rabbits when I was a kid. That's the way they were keeping these bobcats, Canada lynx, and Siberian lynx. They were on these wire floor, or like a puppy mill, wire floor cages. And the flies were so thick in there, we had to put handkerchiefs over our faces just to not inhale them or get them in our mouth. And, you know how when you come out of daylight and you go into a dark building like that, your eyes have to kind of adjust at first. And so as all of this is happening, I start to realize that in the corner, there is this pile of dead cats, and they've just cut this belly fur off of them and thrown the carcasses onto a stack. And the guy's going up and down the cages and he's pulling out these kittens. He's like, you like this one? You like this one? You like this one? And I'm like, who buys bobcats as pets? And he said, we're a fur farm. Whatever we can't sell this year as pets, then we'll slaughter next year for their fur. And all of a sudden, it was like a train in my head, because all of this was starting to come together to me, that that's what was happening to these cats. They were taking this white spotted fur, because the rest of their coat is not so pretty. It's brown with black spots, whereas their bellies are white and has those really prominent dark black spots. And so I started crying, and my husband said, how much for every cat here? And we came home with 56 bobcats, Canada lynx, and Siberian lynx, and thus began the sanctuary.
And there it goes.
Yeah, they say if you build it, they will come. Oh my gosh, they came all at once.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known this story. I've read this story. I had heard about you talk about it a little bit, you know, back when that, you know, the Netflix series came out, but just hearing it again, sort of, I don't know, it brought up all of those stomach hurting emotions, because it just, the thought of people doing something like that to any animal, let alone cats, just makes my stomach hurt. So, but yeah, the sanctuary is, you know, I spend a good amount of time there. So it's definitely one of my happy places, and we get to spend time there together, which is really awesome. So, you know, I know that I can speak for the two of us at least and say, thank you for starting this facility and this organization. And that way we're, you know, able to sort of help you help cats and take care of these cats. So
how many couples do we have there like you guys?
So there's the two of us, there's Brittany and Mark, there's Rich and Beth Ann, and there's Jen and Matt. Is that everybody? There's 4 couples.
I don't think we're missing anybody, but there could be somebody in there.
I think that's everybody.
Yeah, at least the people that we see on the days that we're in.
Yeah, I think that's all of us. I think there's 4 couples.
I think that's wonderful when couples can do that together, because otherwise there's always that conflict between I'm here taking care of the cats or I'm taking care of my family life.
Yeah, with us, it was Bridge was going to Big Cat Rescue, and I would normally travel for a living. And the only time I would get to see Bridget was Sundays, because she was at Big Cat on Saturdays. And so she started, I think in March, and then
I think I started in April.
And then in May, I realized that, okay, I'm not going to see my wife ever, so I should probably go ahead and join this thing. And that was that.
There may have been some convincing on my end too, but
yeah, like, hey, you want to see me? Join. You know, that's kind of how it went down.
Yeah. So,
all right. Well,
stuff that other people didn't want to do, because most people who volunteer at Big Cat Rescue are there because they want to work around cats. Whereas you were working in the gift shop and taking care of IT issues and fixing our TVs and our live feeds that are always broken.
Well, on my side, and I know it's not the same for Bridge, but on my side, I'm very much, I guess, people oriented. You know, we get questions a lot when we're doing our live videos about like, hey, Andy, why can't you go behind the barricades? When are you going to go behind the barricades? And I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not, picking up cat poop is not my bag. And so Bridget thoroughly enjoys it. So it's
most days. There are some stinky days.
Yeah, it's just not my thing. So so you bring back all of these cats. You got them. They're being housed up, and then all of a sudden, years down the road, the idea of the Big Cat Public Safety Act comes about. So how did this come about? Why did you and other people around the world that support this thing think this thing up and the guidelines that go with it? And then what will it support once it passes?
So 1992, we rescued Windsong, the original founder of the sanctuary. In 1993, we rescued the 56 bobcats and lynx from the fur farm. The following year, we went back and got all of the adults and all of the kittens that came along with that. And so that was 28 more cats in 1994. And then in 1995, we rescued 22 more bobcats and lynx off of other fur farms. And we had closed down all of the fur farms that were killing cats in the US because we made a deal with them. We figured out after the first year that we would pay top dollar for every cat they had, as long as they would never kill cats again for their fur. So in 1990, let's see, that was 92, 93, 94, 95, 1996, we started trying to rescue all of the cats off of the Canadian fur farms. And we brought in, like you probably remember, Kathmandu and Kanawha and some of those guys came from that fur farm rescue. And then, of course, I lost my husband in 1997. But what I saw somewhere between 96 and 97 was in addition to these big fur farm rescues, people were calling and saying, would you take my lion? Would you take my tiger? And at each point along the way, I thought, I can fix this. I'll just get all these cats out of this horrible situation. I'll put them all into pet homes. Everybody's going to love them like I love Windsong. And about a year and a half later, they all started coming back. And so we were going to the auctions as well, because what we discovered was, even though we were going and buying llamas mostly, that when these bobcats or lynx or other cats were no longer productive, they couldn't produce kittens, or if they weren't good display animals because they lost an ear or a limb, then they were being auctioned off to taxidermists at these auctions. And so we started buying the old and the decrepit and getting them out of there so that they wouldn't be killed. And in 96 or 97 was when I went to one of these auctions and I recognized a kitten that I had brought in from a fur farm, put back out into a pet home. And apparently, because we always told people, if it doesn't work out, bring them back. But I'm assuming this person that had that cat was just so embarrassed to say that they weren't willing to take care of the animal. They just thought they'd quietly sneak it off and get rid of it at an auction. And I realized that you can't trust people to give these animals a forever home. They're too difficult. They're so freaking messy. They spray urine all over everything to market as theirs. And they grow up to be wild animals that don't want your attention or your petting or to have you dragging them around on a leash.
Yeah.
So that became my wake-up call that we needed to stop this. And Don was not quite to that point yet of recognition. So when he was going to Costa Rica every month, I was having the vet come out and neuter the males as fast as I could. And the side benefit of that was that he really wanted to produce kittens to sell. And so I'd say things like, well, maybe if they had better food, or maybe if they had more vitamins, or maybe if they had more space, everything I could think of to try and give the cats a better life and get him to invest in the idea of doing it. And he just could not understand why these cats could not produce kittens. And I could only do it with the male, because a female, you get this big shaved belly. It's like,
yeah,
like that. But the male was pretty easy to hide. Are you able to pause this?
Yeah.
I have to take this call.
It's all good. We learned to fly by the seat of our pants. I call that the big cat curveball.
It's like an everyday thing.
Yeah. Every day there's a big cat curveball. You just roll it. You just roll with it.
What's the process? Well, today the process. Oh yeah. It's an ever-moving
Some
object.
days everything's going, hunky-dory. Some days you go walk up on a cat who's caught something, and then you gotta figure out how to react to it.
Someday you want to buy one, someday you buy 56. So it happens. So I guess where were we?
You were figuring out how to postpone reproduction.
I was making neutering cats.
Yeah.
So I lose Don in 1997. In 1998, Tippi Hedren, who had started a sanctuary out in California called Shambhala after doing a really awful film called Roar, she had reached out to her legislator looking for a bill that would ban the private ownership and breeding of these big cats. And so they introduced the bill. They called it the Shambhala Act. And like most federal bills, every 2-year session, it would fail and it would fail and it would fail. And I got on board in 1998, helping her trying to get this passed. It finally passed in 2003 as the Captive Wildlife Safety Act. And I think the primary reason that it passed is because other big organizations like the Humane Society of the United States, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, Animal Wellness Institute, or that's not the name of animal something, AWI, all of these big groups got behind the idea of the bill. But the bill did everything. It got rid of circuses, and it got rid of fur farms, and it got rid of it. It was like, you can't touch a cat, period. Leave them in the wild. Just stop all of this. Stop the zoos, stop everything. Well, she was never going to get anywhere back in 1998 with that bill. And so I don't remember how many sessions in before HSUS got involved and said, we need to really just like narrow the focus of this down to something we can pass. Yeah. She was not happy about it. And, you know, I was naive. I wasn't thrilled about it, but it was like, well, if we could pass it, passing something's better than failing at everything. And so the Captive Wildlife Safety Act passed in 2003. And in 2003, we had to turn away 312 big cats, in addition to all of the cats that we rescued that year. And every other year, that number was doubling. And so we needed this bill like big time. And when the bill passed, you always, even once you have a really narrowed down scope, you're still having to negotiate with all of the stakeholders, the circus, the zoos, the private pet owners, all of these people. And so the end result was in 2003 when the bill passed, and it passed unanimously in a Republican-controlled House and Senate and a Republican president, which was really bizarre that it passed that unanimously. It made it illegal to sell a big cat across state lines as a pet. So there were a lot of parameters there, but the next year, instead of having to turn away 500 or 600 big cats, we only had to turn away like 160. And so I was like, yes, this is the answer. We have to have better laws. That's just the only way we're going to get on top of this. And back at that time, man, I mean, the sanctuaries were so full, and we were full. We had 200 cats back then. And every time we would all get together and go, oh my gosh, here's this situation. The government's going to go in and seize these tigers. Who has room? And we're all scrambling around, like trying to help each other with resources to, I'll drive it to here if you can build a cage over there, and then I'll supply money for the food over here. And that's how we were getting by, rescuing those huge numbers that we were having to rescue. But having that number drop by more than half, it was like, yes, this is amazing. And then HSUS mostly, and IFAW to a certain extent, started doing a campaign for better state laws that would ban the private ownership of these cats. And of course, every time they did that, we were all about helping them promote that. And we built up a huge social media presence that made it possible for us to really be a huge voice. Even though those organizations make many times the millions that we make, we have to raise between $3.5 and $4 million a year. And some of them are raising like close to $100 million a year. But we have bigger social presences and more engaged social fans. So we were able to really help push these state bans into place. And as a result, what we've seen is the number of big cats that are in need of rescue every year has dropped. I think last year it was like 34 cats. And that's a doable number when you've got a dozen sanctuaries that are accredited by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries to be able to take those animals. In fact, the other sanctuaries are actually fighting over animals because that's how they stay in the press and that's how they raise funds, is by doing rescues. So that's why Big Cat Rescue hasn't been taking in so many cats in the recent years. We've been devoting all of our time and attention to trying to end the problem at its root and close the loopholes that were left in that bill. So since 2003, when that Captive Wildlife Safety Act passed, there were two huge loopholes. One is it didn't ban private possession, and two, it didn't ban the primary driver for all of these cubs to be bred, used, and disposed of, and that was the cub petting. And so by 2011, you know, we fought and fought and fought to try and close those gaps on our own and couldn't. And by 2011, we got together with do you guys remember the Vampire Diaries?
Vaguely, yeah. I remember the series. I never watched it, but I remember it.
I think you're probably older than that group.
Yeah, I had sort of aged out of that age group.
So vampire movies used to be like really popular. And there was a fellow by the name of Ian Somerhalder who was born in Louisiana. And he was a star teenage heartthrob of the Vampire Diaries. And
Yes, he was
so
very dreamy. He is still very dreamy, Ian, if you're watching.
because you would invite him onto the show, I am sure.
Sure.
Yeah, come on, Ian, if you're watching.
So he had a attorney, her name was Rose Church, and she reached out to me and she said he really hates this situation of Tony the tiger at the truck stop. Do you guys remember Tony?
Oh,
I
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that story.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about what you remember about Tony before
A little.
I remember that Tony lived in basically like a transport cage at a truck stop in somewhere in Louisiana. I don't remember specifically where, but like he was just daily, like 24/7 was exposed to the exhaust fumes put out by those large tractor trailers or lorries, for those of you in the UK who are familiar with that terminology. Been watching a lot of Great British Baking Show here, so we're using a lot of English British terminology. But I remember he was just constantly exposed to breathing in those diesel fumes that the vehicles are putting out. He was constantly, being poked and prodded and harassed, and just always never allowed to just be a cat. And there was no space for him, and he just lived his entire life on concrete transport cage, with surrounded by noise and fumes and just all sorts of unsavory things.
It was a horrible situation. And in fact, the Louisiana Department of Louisiana Fish and Wildlife Department had actually decided they were going to seize Tony, because we got more complaints about that tiger than all of the other complaints we got from all of the other bad guys out there.
Really?
Didn't mount up to what I got from that, because he was at a truck stop. So everybody saw this, driving through Grosstet, Louisiana, and they're just like, this can't be happening in the United States. And so they decided they were going to seize the cat. I had actually driven to Mississippi or to Louisiana to see what the situation was the day ahead of our rescue team, because we had to figure out, what kind of transports do we need, what kind of caging and everything, because this cage that he was in was really tiny, as you mentioned. And of course, like no safety entrances or anything that I could see. And so the day that I arrived in Louisiana, Michael Sandlin, the owner, managed to get a court injunction to prohibit the state from taking the cat. And so we, for the first time ever, hired an attorney to represent a tiger. And that was David Nance. And he fought the Iberville parish for years. And finally, what they ended up doing was saying, okay, even though it is against our rules and laws and has been since 1993 for this to be happening, we're going to go back retroactive and make a law that says it's okay for Michael Sandlin to have done this with this tiger all this time, and we'll leave the cat there, but he can't have any more. And so after we hit that brick wall, the Animal Legal Defense Fund took up the fight, and they fought until the day the cat died, and they still couldn't get the cat out of the truck stop. But anyway, because Ian Somerhalder was from Louisiana, he wanted to do something about this issue. And so his attorney, Rose Church, reached out to me and said, what can you do? And I told her, this is what we've been doing. And we're up against a brick wall. By this time, ALDF had taken over. And so I said, there is something that he could do. And that is, we've got this huge problem with people petting cubs. And if he would speak out against cub petting on his social media sites, which he had millions of followers, that would be a huge help to us. So she went to the dean of her college, Diane Sullivan, and she said, here's the situation. Didn't even know that people were doing cub petting. And so Diane, I thought she was crazy, but she reached out to me and she said, do you think you could get like all of the big players like World Wildlife Fund and Born Free and HSUS, all of those people together at a table? And I said, these people don't play well together. They never have. And we all work together as part of a coalition called the International Tiger Coalition. There were 40 members of us there, but that's how I knew they didn't work well together. And she said, well, I want to try it anyway. And so I reached out to everybody in the International Tiger Coalition. And I said, would you guys be willing to come to Washington, D.C. and sit down around a table and figure out how we can all work together on ending this big cat crisis in America? So IFAW provided the location. There was a big conference table, as you can imagine. I think there were 12 organizations that came together. I have it on a timeline on bigcatrescue.org / something like International Tiger Coalition timeline. Anyway, there was a head person from each one of these huge organizations sitting around the table. And there's a fellow by the name of Jeff Flocken. He ran the International Fund for Animal Welfare in the US back then, and really, really nice guy. And he did a masterful job of keeping this conversation going through all of these egos, as you can imagine. And everybody had their own pet project that they had been working on that they thought was the main thing. You had people there that were like, the fur industry is the whole problem, and other people, the circus is the whole problem, and the private owners are the whole problem. And so each person goes around the table, and I was either the last or the next to the last. Can't remember where Howie and I were sitting, but we were side by side. And so it gets around to me, and nobody has mentioned the fact that it's the cub petting that's causing all of these cats to end up in all of those situations. They use them for that very lucrative first 3 months of their lives, and then they discard them into fur and pet and circus and pets and all of those other kinds of things. I said, we could just stop that most lucrative part. It's going to dry up all of the rest of it. And so what we decided to do was we all agreed that we would come up with a 3-pronged approach to ending this problem in the United States. And we would sit there at that table until we came up with what that approach would be. And so the end result was that we would ban cub petting. We would have USDA, or we would petition USDA to actually enforce the Animal Welfare Act, which would not allow the cubs to be bred and taken from their mothers. That's a take under the Endangered Species Act. And they've just never done anything to protect the animals. And it's a torment to the mothers and the cubs, which is a USDA issue. And then the third part was, back then, there was something called the generic tiger loophole. And what had happened back in 1980 something was that the US Fish and Wildlife Service decided there were so many people who were inbreeding tigers to get white tigers. Mm-hmm. And those cats, and they were crossbreeding because these were in private hands. So they were breeding Amur tigers to Bengal tigers to Sumatran tigers. And so these animals had no conservation value whatsoever. And they said, since there's so much of that going on, and there's so much paperwork we have to deal with, we're going to create a generic tiger category. And if it's not a purebred tiger, it doesn't get protection. Oh. And yeah. So that's how these people were able to breed and discard of these cats so prolifically from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, well, into the 2000s. And so it wasn't until, and even though we petitioned the US Fish and Wildlife Service to rescind their generic tiger loophole that they had created, we did that in 2012, and they didn't do it until 2016. But part of that, the things that Joe was convicted of and that he went to jail for, was he was continuing to violate that after they had filed that in 2016. And they said, if it's a tiger or any part of a tiger, even like lion tiger hybrids, ligers, then it's protected as an endangered species and you're not allowed to sell them, which is what he was doing. So, or kill them at will, which was also what he was doing. So those were what made it possible to finally bring him to heel. So every 2 years, we have reintroduced the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and every year we've had to narrow down the scope of it because, again, we wanted to bring in an awful lot of these other things that were important, like trying to get rid of the circuses and trying to ensure that nobody bred these cats unless they were actually in a legitimate species survival plan that was administered by the AZA accredited zoos. Or making sure things like, if you've been convicted of animal abuse, like with Keisha and Zeus and Kimba's owner, she was convicted on so many counts of animal neglect and abuse that she lost her license. Well, she just had her daughter get a license, and they kept right on abusing the animals at the same location, doing everything they had been. And so we tried to address that in our law. And every year we've had to back away from different things because we couldn't get it passed. So this past session, when Howie and not this session, but the last 2-year session, Howie and I sat down and we said, you know what, if we could just stop the cub petting and phase out the private ownership, all the rest of these things die off. And so that's what we are focused on now. And that's why I think we have a really good chance of getting it passed now.
Well, I was just going to ask how the bill is progressing and how many co-sponsors have signed up currently, are signed up currently. Do you have that information?
There's over 200 co-sponsors in the House. I was looking at that yesterday and it was like, I forget if it was 204, 209, somewhere in there. And it's got more Republican support than it's ever had before, which is fabulous. And then this session started in January of this year. So we had passed the House for the first time. We got a floor vote last session in December, and we passed the House with a 2/3 majority vote. So if you think you have 2/3 of the majority in your favor, you can ask for something that's called a vote with the suspension of the rules. And the suspension votes are really important because typically when Congress is deciding on voting on something, they can discuss it for hours and hours and hours. And the reason that they do that is so that people get tired and go home and just don't even stay to vote on it. So even when they don't have the majority, they can just bore you to death and make you go home. And with the suspension calendar, it's limited to like 20 minutes per side. So they can't do that. And we only have a couple of people that are adamant against the bill. And of course, they are listening to a lobbyist that's been funded by Doc Antle and Mario Tabro. His name is Frank Vitello. And he goes around saying it's going to cost the government a lot of money. They're going to have to put out a whole new agency to monitor all of this. And it's going to be causing confusion between USDA and US Fish and Wildlife Service. And all of those are lies. Anybody who actually reads the bill will see that it's a lie, but they just don't bother to read the bill. They just believe him because he's always known how to push their buttons and they've trusted him. And that's the power of having a really powerful lobbyist in your pocket. So that's why we spend so much money on a really good lobbyist. We hired somebody who represented the NRA because we wanted somebody who knew a lot of Republicans and had that kind of clout with them. And that's why we have so many Republicans on the bill. So anyway, we passed with 2/3 majority vote in December and tried to get it through the Senate and could not get it to the floor for a vote because the election and then the insurrection and then COVID and all of the craziness going on. So we launched again in January of 2021, and we have 200 and some co-sponsors. We weren't even at half of this at this point in the last session. And so many more of them are Republicans, which helps to get you, they're pretty much evenly split now. So you have to really have buy-in from both parties. And then on the Senate side, we've never been able to get a Republican to be a co-lead. And so we got two that signed on immediately when we launched it in the Senate. So that has caused us, we've got like 24 co-sponsors in the Senate right now, and it's a pretty good mix of Republicans and Democrats. So I'm really hopeful now that they just got back from recess that we will get another chance at a suspension calendar vote in the House. Once it passes the House, it makes it very easy for the Senate to just say, okay, we're on board with this too, and they can pass it pretty quickly. So I'm so excited that we are finally closing in on this.
That's awesome.
That is,
it's really cool.
Oh, like I'm getting a little emotional about this. It's just, it feels like something that as a collection at Big Cat Rescue, you know, especially given when we used to give tours, it was something that we talked about on the tours all the time. And I feel like I talk about this Big Cat Public Safety Act all the time, and to feel like the words that I'm saying and you know, the message that Big Cat Rescue is getting is, you know, working to get across is actually, you know, coming to fruition. Feels like there is that light at the end of the tunnel, and there, you know, there's the hope that just, this is like, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, that this is potentially going to happen, and it feels very tangible right now, and it's just something that is very exciting. And I'm getting kind of emotional about it because it's just something that we've all worked so hard for, and it's something that we all believe in and support. And you know, I did pet a cub once before I knew what I was doing, and I was told that this was going to help with conservation and everything, money was going to help. And I remember that feeling when they brought that cub out of, something's not right here. This doesn't feel good. This feels not good. And realizing later on, after I had found Big Cat Rescue, what I had done, and that sort of I've been lied to and I've been misled. And then also, you know, not just the lying to me, but what about these cats? What about all of these cubs? And so, you know, that sort of realization of what had happened, and you know, what I had done unintentionally, but what I had done, and the lies that I had been told, made me angry and frustrated. And the fact that this was allowed to happen to these animals, these beautiful cats, it was really kind of life altering. And so this bill, in my opinion, really kind of, fighting for this bill sort of makes me feel like I'm making amends to that poor cub that I unintentionally harmed. So, you know, I think if people have had that experience where they've pet a cub and they've been lied to and they didn't know what they were doing, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And I think that by supporting this Big Cat Public Safety Act, and also being proactive in getting your representatives to co-sponsor the Big Cat Public Safety Act, you can sort of make amends, in my opinion, to that cub that you may have pet or played with or swam with, or whatever it is that they're doing that doesn't need to be done. You know, it kind of helps balance that scale a little bit better, and maybe, I don't know, for some people help them feel a little bit more.
Yeah, well, we tell a lot of people that, you know, if you've done it before, because I have as well, don't do it again. You know, you didn't know then, and that's fine. It's innocent. You had no idea, but you know, now that you do, you know, help us spread the word on this thing, right?
Yeah.
So
part of that entire industry, because what those people that are pimping those cubs out are doing is taking advantage of the fact that you and other people like you love these animals, and they tell you that by doing this you are saving these generations for generations of people to enjoy, and that you are part of conservation efforts, because if we have a problem with tigers going extinct, then of course we should be breeding more tigers, right? I mean, everybody gets on board with that, and they're being lied to.
Yeah,
that was the great thing about the conservation game film. That was another thing that we're out there promoting and doing a premiere in DC and a premiere in LA. And the conservation game is all about how this whole problem started in America, by having these faux conservationists like Jack Hanna and Boone Smith and the Irwin family and Jared Miller, all of these people coming onto television and telling us they were conservationists who cared about preserving cats in the wild. And all the while they were there with cute little cubs on TV, walking them around on leashes, putting them in people's laps, saying these don't make good pets. And all people were seeing is, I want to go pet a cub like that. I want to be a little guy with a cat on a leash.
Yeah.
And that's what caused this whole problem to begin with. So there has been so much deception out there, and it's no wonder, because we were all raised on that we believed it.
Yeah.
And now that we know better, like Andy said, we just have to do better.
Yeah, one little question, because you mentioned something a little bit ago about, you know, when you with the bill, how they wrote in the loophole about this particular cat, you know, doesn't have any conservation value, therefore you can keep it at that point. So when somebody goes and to pet a cub, that particular cub obviously doesn't have a specific breed, so to speak. When they say, well, the money's going to conservation, we obviously know that is not, you know, where it's going. What do you mean by that cat doesn't have any, I guess, man, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I hate when that happens.
Well, I think what you were asking is, why don't these cats have any kind of conservation value?
Thank you. Yes, that's it. Conservation value. That's where I was going.
Yeah, they don't, because of a number of things. So one is the cats who are in species survival plans. That's a professional plan put together by a bunch of biologists that work at the accredited AZA zoos to try and make sure that when they're breeding, just like if you're breeding a line of dogs or cats, that you're not breeding in genetic defects, like you're not inbreeding so that you get white cubs. Every time you see a white cat, you know it has no conservation, or white cub, lion or tiger, it has no conservation value because the only way to get that is through severe inbreeding. But if it's a golden cub, you can't tell, when you're looking at a golden cat like Jasmine, you're looking at her and saying, I see a tiger, but what you don't know is she a Bengal tiger? Is she a Moor tiger? Is she a Sumatran tiger? So the zoos have for years bred extensively because the public wants to see cute little babies on display. And as soon as that baby becomes a toddler, then it's not cute anymore, or just past, to the juvenile stage, it's not cute anymore. And so they used to sell them directly to collectors. And after Alan Green's book, Animal Underworld, came out in the 90s, they stopped doing that and they started selling them to brokers. And then the brokers sell them to the pet owners. So the zoos have separated themselves one step from selling to private owners, and they don't want anybody to know where that cat came from. So there's no pedigree coming with that cat. You don't know what kind of cat you're getting. And again, because so many people are crossbreeding these cats and inbreeding these cats in private hands purposely to get white cubs or color morphs, then clearly they don't care or know what the background is of the cat. The reason that it's important that a bloodline be kept pure is if there were some way to put these cats back in the wild, which I think is stupid and it's never going to work, and not for the big cats. You can do it with a lynx, but not with a tiger. And what we need to be doing is saving their habitat and letting them breed their cats, for crying out loud. They breed like cats, so they'll do just fine in the wild if we just stay out of their spaces. But the whole concept of the zoos saying that they're doing conservation breeding or species survival breeding is to keep those bloodlines pure. And there are cats, even within specific species, that have regional instincts. So back in the 90s, you guys, I know, knew Perfection, and you knew her brother Persistence and some of the other cats. Those cats were bred here because the AZA said that what they were going to do was breed ocelots and put them back in the wild. They used to live in Texas and Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, down into Florida, but they've been completely wiped out. So the idea was to take these zoo cats, breed them, put them in a soft release program in Texas, and then the next generation would be able to go absolutely free. And we were thrilled to be a part of that. And so we bred the ocelots back then, thinking that we were going to be part of this conservation work. And when they started the program, thankfully, we never gave them any cats because they put them out into soft release and they were immediately all killed by rattlesnakes. Well, the reason that happened is because all of the cats, all of the ocelots that were in zoos had actually come from Central and South America. In those areas, their primary diet are non-venomous snakes. So the minute they turned those cats loose in Texas, they were like, oh my God, look at all these snakes. And it did them in. And so these animals have regional instincts that we can't read. We don't know what they're thinking in their little heads. And so we can't go putting them back into areas if we don't know where they came from. So that's when I say they have no conservation value. That's why.
All right, you got tons of questions here. We don't have much time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of just skip through a couple of the questions, but one of the biggest questions, and I think the most important question, is how can people help get this bill passed? And then for those people who, may not be US residents, how can they help the big cats?
Two biggest things you can do if you are a US citizen is go to bigcatact.com. This is where it splashes up on your screen.
I'll make it real big.
And we make it super easy. You type in your name and address, and it will look up your members of Congress for you. It will preform an email that you can send. It will preform a tweet that you can send. And if you're really brave and you really want to help, the most powerful thing that you can do is to actually make the call. And some people are afraid to call their member of Congress. So call on the weekends, call at night. You're going to get an answering machine. It's not scary. When it calls your representatives, what it'll do is it'll call your representative first. You leave a message, just stay on the line. It will then dial your senators. You have two of those. It'll dial each one of them. You just leave the same message on each one. And we give you the little script, which says, please ask your boss to co-sponsor the Big Cat Public Safety Act. It's that easy. They're never going to ask you a question. They just want to know who's for it, who's against it. And they need to hear from everybody that they're for it. And I would say call every week until they're a co-sponsor. You can find out if they're a co-sponsor by going to bigcatrescue.org/house for the House members and bigcatrescue.org/Senate for the Senate members. And then once they are co-sponsors, thank them and call them maybe once every 2 or 3 months and say, I know you're a co-sponsor and I love you for that, but could you try and get more of your colleagues on board? And that's what's going to make this rise above all of the other stuff that they have to deal with, which is a lot of stuff. I mean, if you watch the news, oh my gosh, no wonder they don't want to talk about tigers. But we have to make it to where they're like, let's get this tiger thing done so that we can get on to everything else.
And everybody will leave me alone.
Yes. And then if you're not from the US, the biggest thing you can do is whenever you see pictures of people touching cubs or playing with cubs or walking with tigers or doing any of those stupid kind of things, call them out on it. It's not cool. Tell them why it's not cool. And the reason it's not cool is because they can only do that while it's a cub. And even though a lot of times those social media texts or videos look like these cats are adults, lions and tigers, they can be a couple 100 pounds by the time they're 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
They can be, by the time they're 4 years old, they can be 500 pounds. And they're still mentally kittens. And the minute they become adults, that's when they try to kill you, like Montecore trying to kill Roy Horn and other people. They get rid of them by the time they're that old. And then there's 15 years of them languishing in a cage or being killed because they couldn't be used. So just call them out on that. There's no reason in today's world for anybody to be doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think big rule, if you have a big cat in your house, waking you up at 6 o'clock in the morning by jumping on your chest is probably not going to be a nice thing for you to have kicking around your home.
Are you speaking from personal experience of having a cat jump on your chest at 6 a.m.? And by cat, I mean domestic, small little girl.
You add 400 pounds to that, and that doesn't sound like a good morning.
No, it does not.
Especially when now you're food.
Ugh, hard pass.
So you're going to go sleep one day and just not wake up.
Yeah.
And anyways. So what else you got?
So I think one big question that a lot of people have, and this is coming from my personal experience working in getting the Greyhound, the ending of Greyhound racing in Florida passed. I worked on that several years ago. But a lot of questions that we had about that was, now are all of these, rescues going to be flooded with greyhounds, so in that instance, we get there's probably some concern that when the Big Cat Public Safety Act does pass, will, Big Cat Rescue and other sanctuaries just be flooded with these cats? Is that going to be an influx of cats just being dumped?
I'm curious, did that happen with the greyhounds?
Yes, the state of Florida passed it. It was like a landslide. It just was like 96% of the voters decided that they wanted to end greyhound racing in the state of Florida. And it's actually done now. It ended in 2020. So by 2020, all racetracks had to be done with that. They had to get rid of their dogs. They had to stop breeding. But there's still court cases going on with the Greyhound Breeders Association and the people who are trying to get that bill overturned. They're still fighting that battle, but they're still losing that battle. So
and with that, they're dogs. I mean, they can be adopted.
That's a good point.
Is an option.
Yeah.
Right. So
dogs, those dogs can be adopted out into houses. These tigers, not so much.
But that was my real question. Jen Leon had worked on that bill, and because it was dogs, she had to get permission to work on that from, because it's like, are you okay with this? Because it's not cats. I was like, absolutely, because it needs to be done. But I knew it had passed. What I'm asking is, did it create this flood that everybody was so worried about?
So when it passed, the bill was written specifically so that there was a grace period. So it was, it passed in 2018, and they had 2 years to kind of get everything worked out. And from what I've seen and heard, it's not like there was a huge flood of dogs, being, languishing in places or having to be euthanized or things like that. There were organizations around the country that had known about this, that had already said that they would step up and say, okay, we'll take X number of dogs here, and we'll take 75 dogs here, and we'll get, all over the country, because they knew that this was going to happen and they were ready. So my assumption is that that's probably a similar way that similar conversation that has been happening in the big cat world.
Yeah, so every time there has been a state ban passed, they have given anywhere from 2 years to 4 years for the people to come into compliance. When Ohio, a lot of our cats came from Ohio. So when Ohio banned private ownership, they gave them 4 years to register the cats, and then they could keep the cats they had if they wanted to. They just couldn't buy or breed more. And that's the way our federal bill reads, that once this bill passes, then people who have those cats register them one time, so we know how many cats they have, which currently nobody knows how many cats there even are in America because there's no registering requirement for non-USDA facilities. But they have to register them, and then they can't buy or breed more. And so they can keep them forever if they want to. And that was true in Ohio as well. And so as a result of that, we have not seen these floods that everybody keeps talking about. But the opposition to bills always says that. They always say, oh, it's going to be this huge problem. You're never going to be able to take care of it. There's going to be people that break the law. It's like, oh yeah, there's always going to be people that break the law, but how about we make it illegal so that we don't have a bunch of people doing it legally? So, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. I did initially, because back when we started this, we were having to turn away 160 cats in a year after that first one passed. And so even at those kinds of numbers, we thought, oh my gosh, once this bill passes, there's going to just be cats everywhere. And it's died down slowly because of these state laws passing to where I don't think it's going to be a big deal.
Great. That's exciting to hear. That feels, again, there's that uplifting feeling like, okay, cool, this is manageable. So I think we're going to kind of switch gears just a little bit. We're going to kind of finish out this cat chat because I know you've got things you need to do, Carole. You've got, birds and tigers and people and all sorts of things. It's a crazy life at the Big Cat Rescue Sanctuary. But so we're going to get a little bit more personal in these last couple of questions. How many domestic cats do you have? What are their names? And how old are they?
I have 2 domestic cats, and they are both feral cat rescues. They are Pearly and May, and they are named after my childhood pet who was named Pearly May, a single cat. The way they came here was they were feral cats that had been brought into the sanctuary, and in both cases, my husband was afraid that they would never make it through our foster program. So as you guys know, our foster program was really successful. We rescued something like over 700 domestic cats and kittens and got them back to the Humane Society to be adopted into pet homes. But some of the cats that we take in, because our people are so accustomed to dealing with wild cats, is we would always take the really difficult cases. And those would be often feral cats. And so we would socialize them, get them ready to be adoptable, and then send them to the Humane Society to be fixed and adopted out. Pearly blew in on a tornado that rocked the sanctuary. She appeared under the Keeper Cafe after that tornado blew through. And when she came out, she was a freak, an absolute freak, scared to death of everything. And we were sitting at a staff meeting, passing her around, trying to get her used to people. And I think it was Afton or maybe Karma who said something about she was going to go to the Humane Society to be evaluated or to be tested. And Howie said, tested for what? And she said, to see whether or not they think she would ever be adoptable. And he was like, well, what if she fails? And she's like, well, they can't adopt out everybody. And he was like, I'll take her. So,
oh, bless that man.
And then May was a cat who was running around the sanctuary, ended up in the cat cages. You may have been here during that whole thing where they were chasing the cat through the cages and managed to finally nab her. And I don't know what her story was. She was probably, I don't know, maybe 4 months old, 6 months old at the time, but her entire belly had completely sloughed off, like she had been laying in acid or her own urine or something in a confined area, and her paw pads were all burned off. And so Afton got her through her initial medical needs, but she was another one, didn't look like she had any chance of ever becoming a pet. And so we figured, well, she and Pearly can hide under the bed together, and they're great buddies now.
I'm glad to hear that.
1 year and 2 years old, I think.
Oh, babies. All right. You want to ask the last question? We got this one right here. It's this one here. I feel like this is your kind of question.
All right, cool. Let's do that. So everybody knows that you ride your bike an awful lot. So when you're riding your bike from home to the sanctuary, what are you listening to? What's on the headphones? What are your favorite podcasts, books? What are you zoning out to while you're riding that bike?
I will bring up my list here. So I like Science Versus. It's all podcasts. Science Versus, Crime Writers On. I can't read these. Increasing Abundance and Exponential Technologies. Brooke Castillo. The Higher Self podcast. The VR AR. The BitClout podcast. Typology. Business Made Simple. Storytelling Secrets. Edge of NFT. The Scoop, The Boost, The AR Show, Voices of VR Podcast, TED Talks Daily, Criminal, and I can't make out their little icon. It's another one about NFTs though.
Well, now I know why the two of you get along so well. You have a lot of, like, I would say like 90% of the things that Carole listens to, you would probably also be interested in and or have already listened to.
Yeah, I gotta up my podcast game.
Yeah, you like to watch nerdy TV though. That's the thing. You're a nerdy TV guy.
Yeah, I got Stuff You Should Know, and right now RV podcast. So gotta get that Josh and Chuck in there.
Yeah, I'm all about the sports podcast.
AR VR stuff. All right. All right, cool. So
I just bought a pair of the new Facebook glasses. Did you read about those?
I did not even know those were a thing.
What? Do they give you like your notifications as you're walking around?
I don't know that it does that, but it ties into your social media thing, and you can take photos and videos by just talking to it.
Wow.
Not creepy at all.
Wow. All right. So if you're wearing...
They partnered with Ray-Ban, so it's the classic Wayfarers.
Oh,
fancy. Very nice. All right, so Carole, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners that we didn't already cover or discuss?
Well, the thing I'm most excited about is the fact that this bill passing means that we have a chance to save the tigers in the wild. And we're going to do that through virtual reality and augmented reality and internet streaming cameras. And I've been saying this for a long time, that zoos need to remake themselves into location-based educational entertainment centers where you go into the Himalayan exhibit and they're blowing cold air on you and you're smelling the curry, and you put on the headset and you are actually standing there on the Alps, or not the Alps, but you're standing there in the Himalayas mountains, and a snow leopard and her cubs walk right by because the live streaming camera is positioned in places where they know these cats are going, and you're seeing all of this in real time. And I've been just geeking out over this. And then yesterday, Deb sent me an article about, it was a Chinese article where they have live internet streaming cameras. They're not the 360 version, but those do exist. And they had them out in the forest, and they were talking about how the Amur tiger is coming back into northern China, and they had a mother walking by with her cubs and all of this amazing footage. And they were saying how it's amazing that they have these cameras in the wild because they're catching poachers and they're learning things about these cats they never knew before. And they're getting all of these other animals, of course, on film, and they're seeing the whole web of life. That's education. That's what we need to be teaching our children. Teaching a child that it's okay to hold a wild animal in a cage because it amuses them, that's like the worst thing we could possibly be teaching our children. We need to teach them respect for these animals in the wild so that we can teach them respect for each other, and so that we protect the wild. So imagine if all of those internet streaming cameras out there had a blockchain, a smart contract, where it's like a feed, like you're paying for your Netflix feed to be able to put your headset on and see those videos. Or the zoos maybe do it in mass and they can provide it to the public for, you pay your $5, you come in, you can see any camera in the world, kind of a thing. Whereas you might not be able to afford to do that as a person. But imagine 80% of that money goes back to that local economy. And that makes the people in that local economy want to protect those areas and protect those animals. And it gives them a financial reason to do so, which is the only way we will ever save the wild, is by monetizing it in a way that preserves it for everyone and gives everybody there the ability to have as good a lifestyle as we have. So I think it's the great equalizer, and I think it's coming. And I think it's coming because of the work that you guys have been doing at Big Cat Rescue to get this federal bill passed, because we can't do this until we end the captivity of these cats.
All right. That was, everything. I want to see, like, I want to go to a zoo where I just stand in like a room and there's blowing cold air on me and I'm looking at monitors on, or like, like projection screens on a wall, and I'm watching cats just out in wild. I think that'd be
awesome.
That would be, I'm watching animals and in the wild, in nature, bugs and, critters and things, all sorts of things in their natural habitat. That is my favorite thing. Like, one of the things that I love most about Big Cat Rescue is when I get to walk by Tiger Lake and I see the birds and I see, the tree with the white birds in them at the end of the day. And it just feels so natural and calm and comforting in this weird urban jungle that surrounds us. We've got this tiny little pocket of just like peace and tranquility. And, you hear the cats calling in the background, which I know is not natural to Tampa, Florida, but it's natural to my Tampa, Florida right now. But I think seeing animals in nature is something that we do need to preserve that. We need to work to make that something that lasts. So I think, that's a great goal. I fully and wholeheartedly support it. And I hope that I get to live to see that happen. I think that would be like one of the most amazing things that has happened in my lifetime, to go from animals in cages to animals just being free and people letting them do that. So keeping my fingers crossed for that one.
And now I have 400 ideas of how to execute it.
Of course you do.
Thanks, Carole.
Your brain just rattled off all these things. So,
yeah.
But truly, thank you, Carole, for being here and for joining us for our very first season 3, episode 1 podcast of Cat Chat. We're so grateful that we're able to do this and that you were our first guest to join us on this. And I'm going to pass it on over to you real quick.
Yeah, I got nothing else. Thanks, Carole. You?
Don't forget to join us again next month. We'll be live. Well, we won't be live, but we will. I always want to say we'll be live because that's my normal go-to.
Well, I think the video after this one will be live for Saturday Walkabout.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll see you guys the first Saturday of the month. We'll do our Saturday Walkabout. You can always follow along with anything that Big Cat Rescue is doing, either on Facebook, or you can check out Daily Big Cat or bigcattv.com. You can check out all of those sites. You can always go to bigcatrescue.org. If there's anything you want to learn about the cats and anything you want to keep up on, all of our resources are there. So if you guys have any questions, that's the best place to go, is to bigcatrescue.org, and that will get you to wherever you need to be. So again, we thank Carole so much for everything she has done for these cats, for everything she continues to do, for the fight that she does. She's the one who has to go to Washington, D.C. to talk to people. So I'm glad better you than me, Carole. So thanks for doing that. And again, thanks so much for joining us today. Good luck with your day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.